Oh, Red Eyes. One of the original decks and still a fan favorite despite the age of the original anime. However, despite the fact that a significant amount of new support was released for the deck recently, in the afterglow of everybody's clamoring for the new support for Blue Eyes in the upcoming Shining Victory, once again looks like it's going to end up as the bridesmaid to Blue Eyes' bride. Can Red Eyes rise past the challenges placed on its new support to stake a competitive place in the meta? Let's find out. The first order of business in building a Red Eyes deck is adding Red Eyes to the mix. However, there are two different types of Red Eyes, the original and the newer Gemini version. In my deck, I run 3 copies of the original and 0 copies of the Gemini version, Red Eyes Black Flare Dragon. The Gemini version has one sizable problem. It is not considered a normal monster in the deck per standard Gemini monster rules. Therefore, its deck summoning utility is non-existent, which significantly hurts its playability. In addition, due to the elimination of Red Eyes Beat Chick as a Red Eyes monster for most named card effects, special summoning Red Eyes monsters from the hand is, in a non-pendulum Red Eyes deck, is still rather difficult. So, while the burn effect associated with Black Flare Dragon is impressive, its activation probability is rather low, so its overall benefits are low, and it doesn't make up for the deck inefficiency that it creates. This build at times does have some issues with a lack of Red Eyes Black Dragons in the deck. However, I prefer this problem to drawing too many tribute monsters that can basically sink the duel right away. Unfortunately for Red Eyes deck builders, a number of other Red Eyes cards are just bad specific variations of Red Eyes Black Dragon. How good would this deck be if these cards were actually valuable? And the only high-level Red Eyes monster that is worth running beyond the original in this deck is Red Eyes Darkness Metal Dragon. However, while useful, really you shouldn't count on it to be the wrecker in this deck that it is in other decks like Chaos Dragon, because you frequently will not have a lot of good targets for it to summon from the graveyard, or even from the hand. Moving on with the Red Eyes direct support, Red Eyes Wyvern. Now, if you could apply Red Eyes Wyvern's effect by foregoing your normal summons or set during the turn and then getting your special summon, then while I still wouldn't run it, one could actually make a valid argument for running this card, because you could still special summon despite not having your normal summons or set and make plays during the turn. This effect triggering during the end phase, this card is far too restrictive to be valuable. Retro, formerly defined as Tracer, definitely represents a valuable component in the Red Eyes deck. Retro helps fix 3 existing problems for the Red Eyes deck. The first major problem is that this deck can get OTK'd rather easily, which is somewhat neutralized by Retro's special summoning effect. The second problem was mentioned above, the lack of ability to summon Red Eyes from the hand. Retro has some positives towards managing this problem through its useful but heavy-handed extra normal summons effect. However, the tribute does hurt. The third problem it cleans up is it is an easily summoned Red Eyes monster, which increases the activation capacity and efficiency of cards like Black Stone of Legend, Return of the Red Eyes if you choose to run it, and Black Metal Dragon. However, despite these advantages, I favor 2 copies over 3 copies, because when I've run 3 copies in the past, it has proven somewhat inefficient. Skip Red Eyes Beat Chick because it's not considered a Red Eyes monster for a number of card effects, heavily limiting its usefulness. Black Metal Dragon is definitely a nice card for while most people run 3 copies, due to the specific design of this deck, 2 copies is all I run due to the lack of the number of cards it can actually search for. Blackstone of Legend is one of those cards that some disparage, but it really is useful for this deck. Its chief ability is to produce positive deck thinning and field presence by tributing itself for Red Eye. It is essential for a number of combo plays for this deck. While running it at 2 copies is sufficient, I like running it at 3. Among the fusion and rituals involving Red Eyes Black Dragon, the only one that is really worth running in a Red Eyes deck is Archfiend Black Skull Dragon. However, the problem with this monster is not a lack of quality from the monster itself, but the resources required to summon it. While Red Eyes Fusion provides the incredible useful ability of sending the material from the deck to the graveyard, the cost is rather great because it stops your play cold. It eliminates your ability to summon during that turn beyond the Archfiend. This condition makes Archfiend a great finisher card due to its Armades-like effect and its ability to typically inflict 3,000 to 4,000 damage on the turn it's summoned. However, it is an incredibly bad field control card, lacking any inherent protection, and it supports bad deck design by requiring the player to run Summon Skull, and because you can only summon this card during that turn, most of the time it's going to be the only monster on your field unless you choose to set something. Obviously, due to the major advantage of Red Eye's fusion, it is important to run the normal version of Summon Skull versus the newer Gemini version, because obviously the Gemini version isn't considered a normal monster in the deck. Overall, due to the general restrictions applied to Archfiend Black Skull Dragon, I only run one copy, along with one copy of Summon Skull and one copy of Red Eye's Fusion, for as stated, this is a finisher card, not I'm going to ride this card to victory over the next 3 to 4 turns card. There is little to complain about with the new Red Eyes XZ monster, 2800 attack, cannot be destroyed by card effects with XZ material, and incredibly useful burn effect that mid-game typically restricts your opponent's play option, and commonly will net you at least an extra 1,000 points of damage before your opponent can remove it from the field. I run 2 copies.
Cards of the Redstone is rather disappointing because it is just a slight notch better than Sacred Swords of the Seven Stars in usefulness. If only this card was named Cards of the Red Eyes Stone, making it searchable via Black Metal Dragon. Overall, I really don't have room to run this card, and in my experience, when I did run it, it was just simply too inconsistent for my taste, just sitting in my hand waiting for me to draw a Red Eyes, because there's so few options for this deck to actually put a Red Eyes back into your hand, other than something like Keeper of the Shrine. This card would have been much more useful and pretty much a staple if you could have tributed the Red Eyes on the field to get the draw 2 and the graveyard send effect. But to send it just from the hand, as I said, it's just too inconsistent. This is another one of the significant errors I think was made in the design of this Red Eye support.
Inferno Fire Blast is an okay finisher card, but is rather bad overall because it can't be searched by Black Metal Dragon, making its acquisition inconsistent, and is a bad draw a vast majority of the time. I stay away from this card because this deck already has enough questionable draws. You don't need more. Obviously, because I don't run either Ritual, I skip the Ritual spells. Of the 3 Revival cards, Red Eye's Spirit, Red Eye's Burn, and Return of the Red Eye, Spirit is far inferior to something like Call the Haunted. Burn is kind of like a quasi-volcanic counter, which does not operate effectively towards the theme of this Red Eyes build, and Return actually has potential due to its continuous effect that can be activated either turn, with a plus when it's actually destroyed. However, I simply find it too inconsistent for my taste. If the deck gets another good level 4 or lower Red Eyes monster, then Return should get a second look. Moving on to the non-direct Red Eyes monsters, I run 1 copy of Keeper of the Shrine, for obvious reasons, ease summoning conditions for Red Eyes from the hand, and increase field presence, as 2100 can be a nuisance at times for your opponent to get over. At first glance, Carboneddon comes off as one of the ultimate troll cards ever designed. After reading its effect, one immediately acknowledges how useful it is for Red Eyes decks. However, then one sees that it's an Earth dinosaur. Seriously, a dinosaur, not a dragon. It can't even be a dark dinosaur? No? Okay. If this card were a dragon, then it would be an automatic staple in all Red Eyes decks, in my opinion. However, despite this incredibly disappointing design decision, I still run 2 copies because there are other ways of getting it into the graveyard beyond Dragon Shrine, and its ability to combo into XZ plays or general power plays using its ability to bring out a Red Eyes Black Dragon from the deck or your hand plays an important part for increasing your winning probability. Furthermore, because I run a limited amount of set back row for this deck, and it has problems with OTKs, not surprisingly, another quality supplemental monster for this deck is Gorz, which I run 2 copies. Not only does Gorz provide OTK stopping ability for this deck, it provides 2 additional advantages. First, Gorz and its token are level 7, which allow for increased extra deck plays, and second, it provides additional raw attack power that Red Eyes can somewhat lack at only 2400 base attack. One of the mistakes I think a lot of Red Eyes deck designers make is being too dependent on Archfiend Black Skull Dragon, which promotes bad deck design, as mentioned, and this strategy also then leads people to completely ignore other extra deck options like Synchro Monsters. I run one copy of Glow Up Bulb and one copy of Jet Synchron as level 1 tuners that can combine with a level 7 Red Eyes or Gorz to access the incredibly useful level 8 Synchro pool, as well as having a Graveyard innate special summon ability that further increase the viability and the variety of this deck. Also, as level 1 tuners, these cards generate access to the Red Dragon Archfiend family. Hey, one Red Dragon family deserves another. The sent to the graveyard aspect of Jet Synchron is not too detrimental because there are cards that actually you want in the graveyard rather than sitting in your hand. Finally, with the Blackstone of Legend, Black Metal Dragon, and the level 1 tuners, one copy of Kinka-Byo is advantageous for this deck, allowing you to special summon Blackstone, to summon a Red Eyes, a Black Metal Dragon to equip to a Red Eyes monster, or a tuner to advance your synchro plays. Also, as a beast, Kinka-Byo can combine with a Black Metal Dragon to summon B-Size Pendulum Dragon. For the remainder of the spells, I run the 2 standard staples for non-pendulum decks, 1 Raigeki and 1 Soul Charge. I run 3 copies of Twin Twister to address pendulum spells and pesky back row like the Mirror Force or Solemn family, 1 copy of Allure of Darkness for draw power, although be a little cautious about banishing a Red Eyes, because limiting yourself to 2 can be problematic in playmaking. Dumping certain cards into your graveyard is always useful, so I run 2 copies of Dragon's Shrine, 1 copy of Foolish Burial. In my opinion, Foolish Burial target should be your tuners or your Carboneddon, depending on the situation, and Dragon's Shrine should dump Red Eyes and Keeper of the Shrine. 2 copies of Silver's Cry to increase Gorz summoning probability and increase combo potential. Also, with all of the important level 1 monsters in the deck, running 1 copy of 1 for 1 works very well, especially merging a Red Eyes with one of the tuners, tuning it into a Scarlight, and then later bring that tuner out of the graveyard, and then making that Scarlight an Abyss is kind of a nasty play. I also like running 2 copies of Creature Swap, because this deck runs a number of quality exchange monsters like Black Metal Dragon, the Tuner, Carboneddon, and Blackstone, which can lead to game-changing momentum changes. Finally, I run 1 copy of Dragon's Mirror for additional access to Archfiend Black Skull Dragon if I have to put Summon Skull in the graveyard, or even one of the more dangerous cards in the meta right now, First of the Dragons. For the trap cards at this moment, I run my 3 general staples, 1 Torrential Tribute, 1 Bottomless Trap Hole, and 1 Solemn Warning, and 1 copy of the quasi-staple Vanity's Emptiness. For the extra deck, there is a nice mix of Fusion, Synchro, and XZ monsters. Other than the Archfiend Black Skull Dragon, I run the First of the Dragons. I run 1 Trishula, Dragon of the Ice Barrier, 1 Hot Red Dragon Archfiend Abyss, 2 Scarlight Red Dragon Archfiends, 1 PSY-Frame Omega, you banish your Allure target, the Carboneddons banish themselves, 1 Crimson Blader, because now that pendulums have been somewhat hit, you still have to look out for those Cosmos and Monarchs, and they like those big monsters. 1 High Speedroid Chanbara, it's your OTK card from the Synchro family. 1 Samsara, Dragon of Rebirth. 1 Mecha Phantom Beast Dracosack. 1 number 11 Big Eye. And 1 Castel, the Skyblaster Musketeer. Overall, Red Eyes decks had huge hype when their new support was announced and released. However, the spike in popularity petered out in a sense because the deck didn't live up to the hype. Unfortunately, I think this occurred for 2 reasons. 1, the lack of Tracer Dragon, which, as mentioned, helps cover some of the serious existing problems for this deck. 2, in my opinion, bad deck design that focused too much on burning the opponent or using Archfiend Black Skull Dragon, which create rather inconsistent decks that reduce winning probability.
This deck works with Retro to cover the weaknesses of the deck, and tries to increase playmaking capacity by incorporating the more useful synchros from the Red Dragon Archfiend family. In my experience, this deck can compete, but still requires that little bit of something extra before it can be a consistent threat to decks like Monarchs or Cosmos. I think it really needs just one more good rank 7 XZ monster, and a good level 4 or lower monster that's treated as a Red Eyes monster couldn't hurt either. Well, that's my Red Eyes Black Dragon deck. Thank you for your attention and your time. I'm out.